My name is Will Holmes. I'm a reader in optometry education, and the name of my presentation was How Do You Know Messi is a Good Footballer? An introduction to trustable professional activities. We essentially set up a number of penalties, so they could be OSCEs, they could be work-based visits and so on. And we say if somebody converts that penalty, they're a good optometrist, they can go on the register, but if they don't, then they're not. The core thing I was trying to draw out is that we don't judge Messi or any footballer, I don't think, or at least we shouldn't, on the basis of a single or even multiple penalties. We judge them on the basis of watching them over a period of time, playing in a number of games, and we form a judgment about them then. And my basic contention during the talk was, I think that's what we tend to do when we think about clinical ability or competence with optometry students. We set up some penalties and we see if they can convert them in a way that's somewhat artificial. And we then say, well, either you're competent or you're not. And it was kind of asking the question, is that a good way of doing things? Does that make sense? So back in 2015, I did a survey where I sent a number of questions to pre-registration supervisors across the UK. And essentially what I did was ask them, when you took on your trainee, before you gave them any training, did they have, and then I listed what's called the stage 1 competencies. So these are the competencies that universities sign off, and they usually use these high stakes penalty type assessments to sign them off. The results of that survey suggested that around about a third of those skills the supervisors did not think the students had. Another third was around about 50% of them thought they had, and then another third, maybe they had them. Refraction was pretty much the only skill that was universally thought to be possessed by those students before any training at all. So these high stakes assessments that universities are doing don't seem to be guaranteeing an ability to do clinical things within the workplace. An entrustable professional activity, or an EPA, is defined as a unit of professional practice that can be entrusted to a trainee once he or she has demonstrated sufficient competence to be able to do that particular thing. Now, that's not my definition, that's a definition by a Dutch academic called Olle Tenkart. He came up with this idea of EPAs. But in kind of lay terms, it's basically a thing that you do professionally that you can entrust to somebody else. When a student undertakes clinical activity within a practice, whether that's at university, a hospital, a community practice, because they're doing the job of an optometrist, they will automatically take part in those EPAs. How can they not do so? They're doing the job of an optometrist. And the idea is, every time they perform one of those EPAs, the person who's supervising them gives them something called a trust score. Now, I'm using numbers here. That's not meant to indicate that you can add them, subtract them, divide them. They're just labels, the numbers. So if as a supervisor you decide that, let's say you're engaging with someone in the area of managing patients with contact lenses, you decide that that student cannot be trusted at all. All they can be trusted with is to sit and watch you do the activity as you talk them through it. That would be a level 1 decision. So you trust them at level 1. If you decided you could trust them to engage in that EPA, again, let's take managing patients with contact lenses, but you needed to be there watching them the whole time to say, do this, don't do that, etc. That would be a level 2 amount of trust. Typically, that's the kind of level of trust that you might exercise with a student at the university currently, or perhaps somebody who comes into one of your clinics who's a real novice and you sit with them whilst they see patients. A level 3 judgment would be you saying, I trust that student with that activity, and I trust them to the extent that I don't even have to be in the room, but I do need to be available for them. I do need to be the room next door, down the corridor, so they can come and get me if there's a problem. And then the final level of trust, for the purposes of our discussion today, would be that you trust them to do it unsupervised. I think Practitioners make trust judgments all the time instinctively. So all we're doing really is asking someone to record something that I think they're already doing. So if we use a platform that's simple enough to allow them to do that, to record what level of trust they have in a student doing a particular thing, I think we're probably talking about overall less work. One of the things that I would counsel you to do when you're reflecting on some of the things I've been saying is to not compare the approach I've described to some hypothetical gold standard. Compare it to what we do at the moment. And at the moment what we do is we take a number of stations or a number of observations and we extrapolate from that the student will probably be okay in a whole bunch of other areas. So we're already in a world where we're not sampling across the board. When we're talking about deciding if a student can be trusted with a particular untrustable activity, it's never on the basis of an individual's judgment. So we always will have a group of practitioners, 8, 10 practitioners, supervising a student over an extended period of time, different days, different clinical situations, giving those trust scores. The fairness is a key one. So at the moment, if somebody has what you might term a bad day on a high stakes assessment like an OSCE, even if they are competent, and let's face it, we all have bad days, that's going to stop them from progressing, isn't it? So if I just have a bad day on a high stakes assessment, even if I'm a good optometrist, I'm stopped. That's not a problem with using EPAs because you're looking holistically across the piece. Equally, and perhaps more importantly, you can't get somebody passing really EPAs by chance. It's possible that you might be quite weak in a particular clinical area, but you get lucky on the high stakes assessment. It doesn't quite come up in the OSCE in the way that would have highlighted that weakness. It's going to be very difficult for you to escape that when you're looking longitudinally over a period of time.